Hey guys, Alison Meow here with 5 new true scary stories to read to you from Reddit. Here we go. I grew up in a college town before going out of state for school. The college is a pretty well-known party school, but all the towny families are close-knit. It's big, but if you grew up there, you knew everyone, and they knew you too. I went to one of the 2 local high schools when it happened. One of the kids at the other high school, a 16-year-old girl named Mia, disappeared from her room on a Friday night and didn't come back. The security camera from her family's apartment building caught her sneaking out of her first floor window and getting into a car, but the video was blurry and they couldn't ID the license plate. At first they assumed that she had run away, but that idea was scratched when they realized she had left her contacts, phone charger, tampons, etc. behind. There was also a footstool under her window, so it looked like Mia meant to get back in. Mia had 2 really close best friends who we'll call Kat and Jen. I grew up with Kat, but we were never very good friends. Kat was a bit of a stereotypical mean girl and wasn't very nice to me, calling me fat, telling the boys I was crushing on that I liked them, sharing mean notes about me during class, that kind of thing. It didn't make my life hell or anything, but it didn't help my self-esteem either. That attitude was apparently multiplied when we got to high school and she met Jen. I don't know much about Jen, but judging from what I've heard from my friends who knew her, she was an awful person, like insulting people for no reason about things they can't control, really loud. Anyway, Jen was the first person to call Mia's mom the next day when Mia didn't show up for work. Jen explained that Mia had snuck out of her room to go joyriding and smoke with her and Kat, but that they had dropped her off at the end of the street when they were done. Mia apparently didn't want to risk waking her parents up with the car. The girls were really upset about Mia and declared innocent almost immediately by the police and Mia's parents. The girls started helping the parents put up search posters and Facebook posts about Mia all over town. No one thought Mia was dead, but that she'd been kidnapped. Running away was ruled out pretty quick. It didn't take long for the entire town to hear about Mia, and for other kids and even teachers to start gossiping. The rumors around the school said that Jen and Kat took Mia to a party where she OD'd and her friends hid her body because they didn't want to get in trouble for drugs. Other people, like my English teacher at the time, thought she'd been killed by Jen's boyfriend, who had been suspected of a robbery in the next town over. And other people thought she had actually run away. There were reported sightings of her in North Carolina, which were later found false. The thing was just a big mess of rumors. Us high schoolers heard about Jen and Kat being involved for a long time before Mia's body was actually found. People defended them, though, and sometimes it honestly didn't seem fair that Jen and Kat had to deal with other people's gossip when their best friend was missing. They were constantly posting about how much they missed Mia on Facebook and Twitter, and Mia's parents and Jen and Kat were really supportive of each other. I first heard about Kat being involved through one of my tennis teammates who worked with her over the summer, and how she was so mad that people were actually trying to blame Kat for such an awful thing. I kind of agreed with her too, because being mean is one thing, but being a murderer is another. This lasted for a long time, until one day Kat had a literal mental breakdown, screaming at her mom, which you could hear on a 911 call recording, and ended up in a psych ward. There she admitted to police that she and Jen had killed Mia and hidden her body on a back road in the woods because they, and I quote, didn't like her anymore. The police took her for her word, went to the spot, and found Mia's body. She'd been stabbed over 50 times with a kitchen knife. Apparently Jen and Kat had lured Mia into the woods that night to hang out and smoke. Once they parked and everyone got out, Kat and Jen jumped Mia on the count of 3 and stabbed her to death with their parents' kitchen knives. Mia tried to run but was attacked by Kat, and tried to fight back but just couldn't do it. Afterwards, they hid the body under some rocks and dirt, cleaned up the scene, changed and burned their bloody clothes, and didn't tell a soul for 6 damn months. Kat even went to church camp the next week. Once Kat confessed, she turned on Jen, who eventually pleaded guilty too. I think Kat was sentenced to 30 years with parole, and Jen to life. I couldn't imagine how much of a nightmare this was for Mia's parents, I really can't. Suddenly the case is on Dr. Phil and Anderson Cooper, and my little town is on every real-life crime show around. Lifetime even made a movie based off the case, which is pretty exploitative and messed up if you ask me. I still can't believe it happened, that one of my childhood mean girl acquaintances ended up as a cold-blooded killer by the time we were 16. It's honestly surreal to see her listed on those Tumblrs devoted to underage killers, which include entire yearbook pages of my friends, and not just Kat and Jen. Their MO was pretty sketchy, and a lot of amateur investigators even took up the case and hypothesized that Jen and Kat were in a sexual relationship and were afraid Mia would out them. And I mean, my southern hometown can be pretty close-minded sometimes, but to do something that drastic and horrible never added up. People would have accepted them eventually. I don't know. I've thought about this so much and for so long, and I still don't know. While my minute experience is absolutely trivial and petty compared to those of the victim and perp's families, my worldview has drastically changed because of it. Anyone is capable of anything. Do not take anyone at face value until you can prove that you can trust them. Even if they are some innocent-looking redhead who sings in school plays and volunteers at church, evil comes in all kinds. I think the worst part of all of it was the vague tweets Jen put out during the time people were still looking for Mia. One of them read, "We really did go on 3." When I was in middle school, I met a kid named Rob. He was working with a friend of mine. He was being loud and disrupting the class, which caused the teacher to send him to detention after a few complaints. My friend wound up working with me, and Rob was unable to find a new partner because no one wanted to work with him. The class soon ended, and my friend decided to introduce us. I didn't care for him one way or the other. However, he seemed to latch on to me because I was so accepting of people. Almost all of my friends in middle school would be considered weird or outsiders, so we took who we could get to socialize. Middle school flew by, and I loved to write. Rob complimented me and was always reading what I wrote. In fact, he got in trouble in class because he was reading my work instead of paying attention. To me, it was flattering and an ego boost. I was finally the center of attention for someone. The flattery was something I craved, with me constantly being overshadowed at home and at school. Rob and I became friends, but he was very clingy, talking on the phone with me for hours. This was before everyone in school had cell phones, but I'm sure he would be texting me constantly if these things happened today. I still found him annoying, but I liked the praise too much to cut it off. In hindsight, I was a bitch to him at first. Then high school came around, and I moved. I lost contact with a lot of friends. Once again, this is before cell phones and Facebook were everywhere. However, those I had the number of, I talked to constantly. I was having trouble making new friends, and it was a new environment. Then I heard that Rob hadn't stopped talking about me, how much he missed me, how depressed he was that I wasn't around, etc. To 14-year-old me, this was almost like a declaration of true love. I was so happy that I was so missed. After all, a guy has to be constantly thinking about the girl he loves, right? We started dating, talking on the phone when we could, saying we were boyfriend and girlfriend, etc. He mentioned that he had started drawing and writing just like me. He kept all the pictures I'd drawn for him and said his stepmom had stolen some of the writing I had let him borrow to read and refused to give it back. We maybe saw each other twice during the few months we dated. He had suddenly gotten very touchy-feely and started showing me written erotica. Being as young and religious as I was appalled. Still 14, and your boyfriend is trying to push you into sex. This grossed me out, and I expressed that it made me uncomfortable. He merely shrugged and promised not to show it to me again. Then he asked me to hide it because his bitch of a stepmom would take it from him if he found it. I started to get a nervous feeling in my stomach, but I thought it was just a normal problem. I was terrified of talking to my parents because I'd been sneaking around to go see him. I finally decided to break it off. I called his house after a church meeting, and his mother answered in tears. I asked her what was wrong, and she explained that he had been hauled off to a mental hospital. Apparently, as she put it, he had been writing disturbing writing, but she didn't want to talk about it. I decided to not make it worse and continued to date him until he got back. After that, the calls got more needy, and he would call me all the time. Once he found out about my cell phone, he called me when I was out with friends. When I said I couldn't talk, he'd say, "Okay, I guess I'll go write or something." When I asked to see his writing, he claimed it was embarrassing and wouldn't match up to a pro like me. At this time, the sugar-coated praise had started to annoy me, and I had become self-critical in an attempt to improve. He was still acting like we were in middle school when talking, refusing to move on to other topics. However, I bit my tongue because I was worried of what would happen if I broke it off with him. It all came crashing down one afternoon when I got a call from him. It was almost summertime, and we were going to make a plan to go swimming, and maybe finally lose it to each other, as he jokingly put it. I had been miserable leading up to it, but I was trying to make him happy. After I hung up, I immediately got called back. I recognized the number as him, and wondered what was going on. "Hello, is this Alice?" a woman answered. Yes. Who is this?" "This is Janice, Rob's stepmother." The stepmother who he constantly claimed was a bitch, was stealing everything I'd given him, was trying to keep us apart? My teenage stupidity almost made me hang up on her, but then she followed up with, "You need to cut off all contact with Rob. He's dangerous." Dangerous? How? As it turned out, the real reason Rob had gone to the mental hospital wasn't because of his depression, but because of how his writing had focused on the two of us. He had planned on killing his family first, then having sex with me, before killing my family, and the two of us running off together. She read a few excerpts from it, which freaked me out. He went into so much gory detail about how he would mutilate the female members of my family. He'd started to make plans and had even started hoarding knives in his room. I ran out of my room screaming for my mother, who snatched my phone from me and talked to Janice. They talked for so long. I remember rocking and pacing, white-knuckled as my mother finally hung up. We went to my father's. The two were separated, something Rob and I had bonded over, and he sat me down and had me tell him the whole story. My parents told me I would pick the direction it would go. I didn't want to press charges, because Rob was obviously sick. They agreed, but only on the condition that I would give my phone to them if he ever tried to contact me again. I agreed, too scared to think it through. Luckily, once my parents got involved and criminal charges were threatened, Rob backed off. His mother blamed me for everything, accusing me of stealing her son's virginity, despite us never having sex. She then said that I was a horrible person for breaking up with him and lying about everything, despite Janice bringing out the evidence. She then tried to blame Janice, and I told her that I never wanted to hear from her again or I would call the police. Aside from a couple of attempted messages on Facebook, Rob has never contacted me again, and I'm thankful to his stepmother for telling me everything. While nothing got much worse, I realized how many red flags there were. The bottom line, don't stay with someone out of pity. You never know who may be manipulating you. I work at a diner and have a reasonable shift from 11 till 7 p.m. During the winter it gets quite dark, and the latter half of my car ride home can get quite lonely due to the area I live in. Anywho, the day in question started off very strange. I received a phone call from an unknown number at 6 a.m. Stupidly, I answered, and a hoarse laughter rang through from the other side. I quickly ended it, assuming it was a prank call. I received at least 8 more calls from an unknown number. Of course, I ignored them all, but it had ruined my morning and left me on edge slightly. Perhaps that was why I spotted the red Toyota that had been following me for a large part of my journey to work. I could see from the rearview mirror that the driver was an Asian man, perhaps Indian. Just when I thought I'd try and take an alternate route to work, the pursuer turned at the next left. I let out a sigh of relief. Maybe I was being paranoid because of the endless calls in the morning. The shift at work was a decent one until an Asian man walked in. There was something about him that was familiar, until it clicked to me that it was the same guy that had followed me in the morning. It was now 6 p.m. and nearing the end of my shift. Had he been waiting for me? Was this guy my caller? Or was it pure coincidence? Unfortunately for me, I was at the till. He joined up the short queue. He was wearing a checkered purple shirt, and his mop of black hair had been combed to the side slightly. He kept fidgeting with his glasses, and when it came to his turn, he seemed almost scared to speak. "What would you like?" I said, faking politeness as protocol demands. "Get me a black coffee," he said in a distinct Indian accent. I asked for his name to write on his cup. It was a feature my employers were copying out of Starbucks, I guess. Sanjay, he had told me. He left the diner with his beverage, and that was that. On my route home, after my shift, it was all serene, but I always dreaded the latter half of the journey, due to the lonesome streets. Perhaps I watched Criminal Minds far too often. When I got to my street, my eyes locked onto a car, a red Toyota. It was parked across my apartment block. I slowed down. I could feel my heart racing faster and faster. I meticulously began reversing, as if trying to remain discreet that I had even turned onto the street. I then drove past my street and kept driving. After around quarter of an hour of aimless driving, thinking, pondering, and pure perplexity of why the same car would be there, I decided to call a friend and stay over. This place was another 20 minutes away. The very next day, however, a paper cup was attached to my wind wipers. A name was scribbled on it, Sanjay. There was the logo of my diner. My fears were confirmed, and my friend advised me to contact the police, which I have done. I was too scared to be on my own, to even go home or do anything. I didn't know what the Sanjay wants from me, and I didn't plan on finding out. Around 2 days later, I returned home, and everything was fine for a week or so, until one night. I can't remember exactly how the day had gone, but it was normal, and I hadn't noticed anything conspicuous or out of the ordinary. I had woken up that night at around 4 a.m. or so to go to the toilet. As I walked across the corridor, a shadow caught my eye to my left. There was a figure at the end of the corridor, just standing there, engulfed by darkness. I screamed from the pit of my lungs and lunged myself into the toilet in front of me, leaning against the door as I wept for mercy. Whoever this assailant was proved to be very strong, as they were right there on the other side, pushing the door open with great force. I kept screaming, shouting aimlessly. I was praying for someone to help. I was sitting down, my back facing the door, and my legs in the sink as support. He had immense force, as the door kept gaping open slightly, and I could hear his grunts and breathing. Then, just like a miracle from God, my front door started banging. I could hear voices, my neighbors. "Janet, are you okay?" It was Michael from next door, and I could also hear Joel from one floor below. They began smashing at my front door to try and get in, and my assailant seemed to have fled. The shoving and attempts to enter my toilet had stopped. I remained in there, however. Soon after, I heard a loud crash and my neighbors came in. I came out crying, helpless, scared. We called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. They said they would search the cameras of the apartment building, but it seemed as if he had come in through a window leading to the fire escape. Although I didn't see who it was, I'm confident it was Sanjay, and I fear that he will return to finish the job. The man in this story is the son of dear family friends. I met him at a Dairy Queen when he was eating with his wife and child. He recognized me and my daughter from a picture his mom gave him to recreate through drawing since he is good at art. He introduced himself and I eventually leave, but I didn't give him my name. That is important. So on with recent events. I was on Facebook and get a friend request from Tad, the man from Dairy Queen. I accept, and he starts commenting on every post I make, and some are not very appropriate, but being as I don't like causing drama, I ignore it and delete his comments. About a week after I accept his friend request, I changed my profile picture, and he sends me a message saying that he liked it and he thought I was very beautiful. I cut the conversation short because it made me uncomfortable and told him I'd talk to him another time. He told me okay, and he was sending me love, hugs, and kisses. That made me sick to my stomach, so I block him from my messages. The next day, my dad called me in the living room and had asked what had happened because he got a message from Tad apologizing for being a creep. I told him and got angry because even though he knew it was creepy, he still said those things. My dad told him not to contact me again. Fast forward about 2 to 3 weeks later, give or take, and my best friend Edgar calls me. I have more guy friends than girlfriends, and almost every picture that I have on my Facebook, I deleted it and you'll find out why, was of guys. We are truly all just friends, and I look at them like my brothers, so I have no romantic feelings for them at all. One particular picture that I posted was of me kissing his cheek, and since our families were all together, I tagged them in the picture. So Tad sees the picture and sends my best friend Edgar a message threatening him, telling him he will take him down if he sees him, because he didn't deserve to be making love to me every night, and holding me every night, and a bunch of other weird stuff that I just can't bring myself to type. So of course Edgar blows up at him and tells him to watch his back. After that, I just decided to delete my social media and stick to calls and texts. I started to get a little freaked out, but not to the point where I felt like I needed to be with someone at all times out in public. Big mistake. I was at the grocery store with my 2-year-old, and I go down an aisle that has stuff blocking the end due to stocking shelves. When I turn around, I see Tad, who gets right next to me and tries to touch my arm. The only thing I'm thinking is keeping my baby safe and calm. He starts asking if I'm still with Edgar and how he's not worthy of me, and I firmly tell him now it's none of his business, and he is married, so he shouldn't be saying inappropriate things to me, and he needed to worry about his wife, not me. The entire time he's talking, I'm trying to inch away, but he's trying to hold my cart that had my kid in it, so I'm mentally going over my options. Finally, after what felt like hours, a group of men come down my aisle, and I bolt. I was practically running, but I didn't care. I grabbed my baby out of the cart, jumped in the van, locked the doors, and take off to the gas station down the road where my friend's mom worked. I called my dad and asked him to follow me home and explained what happened. I haven't been out alone, especially with my child, since then, and don't plan to be for a very long time. I'm hoping since he hasn't tried to send any more messages that he's just changed and got the message to leave me alone and realized how inappropriate he acted. So Tad, the old, creepy son of a dear family friend who cornered me and my child, let's not meet again. So about 5 years ago, my nephew Tommy was only a couple months old. His mother, my sister, was working a lot because her boss was an ass who punished her with extra hours for her maternity leave, so occasionally me and my sister's husband would take him to the park. It was a Sunday, and we stopped for a break on the bench with Tommy in his stroller. He started crying, and his papa had just changed his diaper, so I fished through my bag for his milk bottle that his mama had filled earlier. It wasn't there, though. His papa looked in the back of the stroller, and we couldn't find it. I'm so confused as to where it's gone when this woman runs up from where we had been walking with the bottle in hand. She comes over and asks if this is our baby's bottle. She saw us drop it down the path. I say it's my sister's baby, not mine, and thank you for the bottle. She smiles and keeps jogging. His papa is on his mobile as I shake the bottle, but the cap is loose and it spills all over my coat. He looks up as I wipe it off and asks, "What's that smell?" I don't know what smell he's talking about at first, so I bend down to sniff my coat when I see that there's a stain where the milk spilled, identical to that of a bleach stain. And when I smell my coat, it absolutely stinks of bleach. I am so horrified and angry. Immediately I twist open the cap, and alas, the bottle of milk is an orange mess with froth and dots of milk. It smells like someone vomited in a freshly chlorinated swimming pool. I start shaking. There's bleach in this. I hand it to his papa. He smells the bottle and chucks it in the bin. Call the police, he says, so I dial on his phone, and he runs off looking for the woman before I can say anything. I fish the bottle back out of the bin and tell the police what happened. They tell me to stay put with the bottle and wait. They found the woman. They also found the bleach tablets in her bag. She pleaded guilty to use of poisonous substances intended to endanger life, and she'll be in prison for the next 15 years still. I wish it was more. I don't even want to think about what could have happened to Tommy if he drank from that bottle. I'm just grateful I never gave it to him and hope I never meet that witch again.